So what do we do between two tastings? Let's talk about glass. Like, fucking come on! I feel I got a bum slot here, especially for the fact that I've not been able to really drink all day, which is really disappointing so far. Tastings after this, I'm going in. I'm definitely going in. Hello to everybody that I don't know in the room. I know quite a few of you. For those of you I don't know, my name's Nolan. I'm the head of emerging brands at Verallia UK. Until last year, we were Allied Glass in the UK. We're now part of the Verallia Group, so we got a lot more fun things to work on at the moment. So I'm here to talk about sustainable glass. I mean, glass is pretty sustainable. Like, I always get this word wrong because I'm Canadian. Aluminum, as I'd say. Is it aluminium? How do you say it? Let's go with it. Let's go with it. Right. I knew I was going to get that wrong. 100% recyclable. It's infinite. Yeah. Perfect in the circular economy. So fantastic material. We use this a lot right now at Verallia. Reimagine glass for a sustainable future. The other day I was putting together a presentation and my son was like, what does that mean? And I was like, oh, have a seat, son. He went and played Xbox. So I think it's very straightforward, is that there are a lot of changes that we can all make, all of us in this room, to make glass more sustainable. The material in itself is very sustainable, but all of us need to be a bit better, to be honest. So for years we go into meetings with like brand teams and they'd be like, oh, what's new in glass? Nothing's really changed in glass, like, except for when we changed from blowing glass with pipes to IS machines in the 1930s, 40s. It's been pretty straightforward. You know, we've done some more complicated shapes, things like that, but you know, the technology has pretty much stayed the same until about 4 or 5 years ago, and now everything is going at lightning speed, and obviously it's being pushed by sustainability. We are an industry that started in the Industrial Revolution, and we were based on fossil fuels. So, as you can imagine, and as it's been pointed out so far today, you know, there's some big steps that we can take, and we're taking those steps right now, which is exciting. So, before we start this chat, I want all of you to have a little think about this. On a scale of 1 to 10, how sustainable is your glass bottle? Now, I really look at this that every brand and every brand journey is completely different. And I kind of look at this scale like a health scale. You know, how healthy are you? You know, you can exercise and you can eat healthy, but you might not get sleep, or you might be like me that likes wine and pasta. So, you know, it's going to be hard to be a 10. But there's a lot of things that you can do to contribute to that 10. And there's always improvements you can make. And hopefully from the chat today, I'll point out some stuff that hopefully you know some steps that you can move forward. And you can see what we're doing as an industry as well to move things forward. One thing I do want to point out is that I'm going to be talking about the whole industry. So I'm not just talking about Verallia as a business around the world. I'm talking about what all of us are doing as manufacturers together and individually as well within technology and such. So I really look at how you can be better. You know, it's really basic, right? It's a fruit tree analogy. So you've got your low-hanging fruit, your eco-design, recycle content, reduce, reuse. Middle ground's your distance to manufacture, circular economy, and then your top tier is, you know, the fun stuff. So new technologies and also glass availability. And I'm going to be going through all these today. So before we start that, I want to talk about the glass types, because this is really important, and I don't think as many people fully understand this as they should. So premium flint, that means 100% raw materials. Now, there are some steps going through over the next couple of years that some recycled content might get snuck in, but it's not as straightforward. It's super clear glass, right? So low to no recycled glass content. Standard flint, by the way, these are UK averages as well. These aren't worldwide averages. Standard flint, on average in the UK, most of the manufacturers are running between 20 and 70% recycled content on average. Remember that number because it's going to come up in a minute. And then with colored glass, you can go a little bit higher because you're not having to keep the glass clarity stable. So if you think about colored glass falling into clear glass, it's like dye in the water. So that's one of the things that's really held us back with recycled content. So that goes from 0 to 95% recycled glass. There's also going up to 100%, which you can get to with using some post-consumer glass. Now, a couple manufacturers in the UK have done it over the last couple years and also use biofuels, really cool stuff. But the one challenge that all of us have right now is how do we make that scalable in big furnaces? So, eco-design, easy solution, easy-ish solution. So, Carl Mason, I think he's sitting over there, often tells me he is a self-proclaimed Renaissance man. If you've met Carl, you'll get the joke. So, when he moved from his first bespoke bottle to his second bespoke bottle, he had a lot of learnings. And one of them is that his thick base, a big puck of glass, you know, there was a lot of other brands in the market that had lost that but still had a beautiful bottle. It wasn't, you know, it didn't mean it was premium if you had the glass. So obviously there's going to be some cost savings with that, which is fantastic. We all like that. Takes less raw materials, better for the environment. It's more energy efficient, not only for how much materials we're taking to make it, but obviously for things like shipping, it's lighter to ship. And also filling speeds. You can run a bottle down the line at a higher speed if it's lighter. Much better for scalability. So if you look at the Mason's bottle, it's 23% lighter than the previous bottle. And if we look at the averages right now of bottles going through MPD, I'd say that if we looked at premium spirits within gin and other categories such as rum and whiskey, the average bottle weight a couple years ago was probably 800 grams. It's now dropping down to about between 500 and 600 grams. So there is a massive shift that is not only being pushed by brands, but also being pushed by you know, some of the laws that are being proposed by the EU, but also a lot of the buying monopolies in the Nordics and also Canada are now pushing on glass weights. It's a really important thing. And I think that if you're looking at bespoke or you're looking at scale, it's something that you really need to think about right now. Recycled content, right. So, this is from, so British Glass is a body that all manufacturers in the UK were all part of, right? So every ton of glass remelted saves 580 kilograms of carbon dioxide emissions. Now, don't worry. You don't have to do the math on that, because even that, I was like, that sounds great, but what does that mean for each bottle? So if we look at recycled content energy savings, you've got your scale there. So 10% is about 2.5% energy savings. And then if you're pushing up to that color glass, you're at 22.5%. So if you look at the UK average for standard flint right now, or if you look at our average, which our minimum average running standard flint right now is about 52%. So you're saving just below 13% in energy savings, which just switching. So if you look at the Warner's bottle, they moved from premium flint to standard flint. That was literally in a day, a big savings to their brand, to the carbon footprint, and also created a great story to talk to their buyers and their distributors about. Reduce, reuse. So I think it was at the Ginposium last year that David was talking about the East London Liquor Company and putting labels on bottles. And he's like, oh, the glass guys aren't going to like this. We love it, right? If, you know, we, especially in the UK, we're amazing bottle makers. So our bottles should last, right? 100%. So I love going in a bar and seeing a bottle of water on the bar with one of the bottles that we've made. You know, that's the whole point about making a beautiful bottle. The one key thing is as John from Trevethan pointed out, it gets a bit tricky when it comes to duty stamps, and also you just need to make sure you're doing it in a sanitary manner. But yeah, we are behind this 100%. Circular economy, right? So this is where we start coming in. So it comes from decisions that you guys have made. I'd probably argue to this point that we can help you out with, to this is something that's super important to us. So does everybody get the circular economy, the concept of it? You know, we pull sand out of the ground, we take it to a factory, we melt it, we make some bottles, it then goes to a brand, they fill it, goes into the market, the consumer takes the bottle, puts it in the recycling bin, and then it keeps on going, it keeps on going, it keeps on going. As a group around the world right now, Verallia is running 55.7 external cullet. So cullet is ground down glass. We will keep on moving that number. It's all about clarity of glass and being stable. But one of the challenges that we have is this number in the UK. So this number's in the press a lot. 74% recycled content in the UK. Is anybody from Wales here? I was going to give you a high five, because actually Wales is a little bit higher than that. So 74% is good, right? 74% is a lot higher than a lot of other countries around the world. But if you think about it, 74% means that we can only put 74% recycled content into a bottle, right? So if we are going to keep the circular economy going in a market, and this goes for any market, the States, you know, South America, Europe, wherever, right? It doesn't matter. If we don't have enough glass, we can only put that much glass in, yeah? So we can get that number really high, but only if we have enough glass. So this number for me is really important because I think that we can do as much as we can as manufacturers, but I also think there's an onus that needs to go on everybody in this room and consumers to push that circular economy and push that recycling. Why aren't people recycling more bottles? Because we can't push that number any higher unless we're given enough glass to do that. The other alternative is that we can bring in some cullet from other countries, but that's counterproductive, isn't it? You know, bringing in cullet from China isn't going to help us with overall sustainability. So something that you really need to think about. Distance of manufacture. Now, everybody seems to be focusing right now on lightweighting and recycled content in glass, which is fantastic, right? But that's kind of low-hanging fruit. Distance of manufacture, and this is when the scale of 1 to 10 really comes into play. Distance of manufacture is super important because those road miles are super important to your overall carbon impact. So if we look at the glass supply for the UK, so this is just for the UK, this isn't for the world, but the UK, in blue, this is where glass comes from as a majority for the UK. Russia's in yellow because we're not supposed to be buying stuff from Russia right now. Different story. Right, so if you look at it, we're bringing in glass from Mexico, South America, Asia, lots of parts of Europe. So we're not self-sustaining our glass. So there's a lot of miles in our glass. Now, I know, I've put up a rum bottle at a gin event. I've done it for a reason. Well, I've done it for 2 reasons. The first reason is that Russ Wakeman, if you don't follow him on LinkedIn, who's the founder or co-founder of Two Drifters, follow him. Because if you take sustainability seriously as a brand, you should follow him because he explains everything that they're doing in their distillery very simply, and it's fantastic to watch his progress. So I used Russ and his brand as an example of road mileage because what would be really easy is for me to take Carl Mason because his distillery is like 40 miles away from our factory, so of course we're always going to win, right? Buy British. But I thought, okay, let's make this fair. So Russ is in Devon with his distillery. So actually, for some of the glass, it's just a ferry ride if it's coming from Europe, give or take, context. So if you look at UK, so in weight, you've got 319 kilograms of CO2, yeah? If it's coming from France, so there's a French manufacturer that many of you know. Not sure if you like them. But even that, so if you think, so they're in northern France, so it's literally a ferry ride away, and the distances are pretty close. So if you look at the road miles, you're only talking, just short of 200. But there's a 39% increase in your carbon, in your weight. When you go to Slovenia, you're getting a 309% increase, and then you go into Italy, it's 328, give or take. Those are big differences. Those are big wins. Now, I get it that everybody can't source locally. I get it that when you set up a brand, you find a bottle that you love and you want to get it and it's coming from where, it's fine. It's a scale of 1 to 10. But what I will say is that as you start scaling and as you can move into your own bottle, it's very well worth if you have the opportunity to think about how you can locally source. There's also the thing around cost. Let's be brutally honest with this, right? Bottles from China are a lot cheaper than bottles from Europe, and bottles, in a lot of cases, from the UK can be more expensive than they are in parts of Europe. A couple of people have said so far today there is a cost to sustainability, and there is. And that's your decision as well, but how much is that cost worth? So if you look at the road miles and you look at the recycled content, I use Isle of Barre as an example. So this is their new bottle. So they used to get their bottle made in France. They moved into a new bottle. I think it's 17% lighter, but to just kind of make it even, a like for like, shipping up to northern Scotland, Isle of Barre, if they're buying it from France and it was in premium flint compared to buying it in the UK and it's in standard flint, they have an estimated, give or take, 54% carbon savings in that bottle. That's an amazing result. And it's just taking a couple things that they could control, putting them together and finding a solution. New technologies, the fun stuff. the fun stuff that I had to do a lot of research on, because there's a lot of moving parts. And this is where it comes to the piece that let's talk about everybody, because everybody is doing something different at the moment to try to find the right solution. So we've got a commitment in the UK by 2050 that all glass manufacturers, all types of glass, so windows, everything, are going to be net zero by 2050, yeah? It seems like it's a long way away, but there's some big steps that need to happen in the technology. So there's new furnace technology. So there's gas-electric hybrid. So there is an association of glassmakers called FEVE in Europe, and they had this thing called the Furnace of the Future that they were trying to build, and they didn't get the right funding from the EU, so that essentially is not happening, and everybody was buying into that. The good news is that some of the larger companies, including Verallia, decided to build their own anyway. So what that means is that this technology is now something that's in the pipeline, and it's being tested, and it's going to be rolled out. What a gas-electric furnace does, and why FEVE quite liked it, is that it's versatile. Because what we need to remember is that around the world, sourcing energy means different things for different countries. So I come from the west coast of Canada. I come from British Columbia. There's a lot of mountains and there's a lot of water. So building hydro dams is like logical. And there's multiple hydro dams in British Columbia, except for a really small hydro dam in Scotland. You can't really do it in the UK. So, we just have to think about where we're going to get that energy from and what makes sense. The gas-electric hybrid furnaces, what that means is that right now most furnaces, modern furnaces, are running 20% electricity, 80% gas. And what they're looking to do is flip that. And what that also allows you to do is you can vary what you're doing with that furnace, depending on what your energy sourcing is. So it actually is the most sensible option. There's also pieces around making furnaces that continually happens more efficient. So using things like oxyboost, so using oxygen to have better fuel use. There is better energy use, better insulation throughout furnaces. All these things are happening, and a lot of our competitors are heavily investing in all these solutions because everybody's trying to find the perfect match. And then there's 100% electric furnaces. So we're actually building 2 of these in France at the moment within the Verallia Group. France has got a lot of nuclear stations. It makes sense to build those over there. And then there's low carbon hydrogen that NSERC is looking at launching their furnace in, I think it's 2030, which is really exciting. So if we can actually get green hydrogen, which is the big if, and I know the UK government's putting a lot of money into the infrastructure, that's a fantastic solution. So, amongst all of us, we are looking at multiple furnaces, multiple ways to melt glass that is going to be more sustainable moving forward. And then there's new fuels. So hydrogen, like I talked about, and then there's also biofuels. So multiple manufacturers have done trials on biofuels. The challenge is the scalability and the availability of these biofuels. So it's great if you do a trial for a couple days, but if you can't do it 365 days a year across, your 30 factories around the world, it becomes more of a challenge. So it's what can we do that will adapt everywhere that's going to work for everybody? There's a point here that I've completely forgot. We'll figure it out later. It'll be fine. So, if you look at this fancy chart that was given to me by one of my colleagues, and you look at kind of where we were, you kind of break down how we're going to get to that net zero over time. So there's natural changes. There's more efficient furnaces, right? And we're kind of at that point. We're always progressing with that. There's fuel switch to electricity. This for me is really interesting, and we'll get to it in a second. There's fuel switch to hydrogen. There's increased cullet use, so that recyclability. If you actually look at the overall scale, as much as that cullet use is important, and that's why I said everybody's talking about recycled content, it's not the be-all and end-all. It's fantastic. It's one of the tools we have in the box. But there's bigger fish to fry here. And then there is carbon capture storage. So one of my colleagues was explaining this to me the other day, and he's like, the easiest way to explain carbon capture is that, so imagine if you're like a painter decorator and you come into this room and the manager's like, can you paint this in a day? And you'd just be like, no way, no way. But if he sat there and he said, can you paint the skirting boards in the day? It's realistic. So if you think about that flip that we were talking about with the hybrid furnaces, so if we're flipping 80 to 20, yeah, they're only going to have to capture 20% instead of 80%, and it then becomes realistic, in theory. So these are some of the big steps we're looking to, and then when you get down to all of that and all the fantastic work that everybody's doing, we then get into that realistic view. There's also the big thing around grid decarbonization. If you have some time, if you're not fully versed on the UK grid, have a read about it, because there's a lot of work that needs to happen outside the glass manufacturers to allow the grid to not only allow glass manufacturers, but other manufacturers hit some of these targets as well. So, there's a lot of stuff to go at, and it's going to take some time. But we're doing some really big, quick steps, and it's quite exciting at the moment. So, the samples are coming in, and I'm almost done. This is great. Availability. So a couple people said to Pal, part of sustainability is definitely the availability of glass. And listen, guys, I know what it's been like. We've been answering our phones. We've been going through it as well. So what's been causing the availability issues, not only in the UK, but around the world? Well, it's multiple things. So COVID did it. So there was already increased want and need for glass moving into COVID. Glass is more popular, which is fantastic. All glass manufacturers were reacting and planning to build bigger furnaces, bigger machines, longer lines, so on and so forth, new factories. These things take time. COVID happened. Shipping containers went through the roof. All this glass that nobody wanted to admit that was coming from China wasn't coming from China, or was really expensive. So then there was more of a need that was coming onto all the European factories. And then the Ukraine war happened. So there's multiple glass factories in Russia. There's multiple glass factories in Ukraine. Unfortunately, one of them was completely shelled in the first week of the war. That meant that a lot of glass supply was taken out as well. The positive note is that we're starting to see more availability pop up, especially over the last couple months. Two of the glass factories in Ukraine are now running again. Some new lines are starting up. Some people that had shut down their factories because of energy costs are now lighting them up again. There's a lot of good things that are happening. Is it going to change the world in the next 6 weeks? 100% not. It's still going to be a challenge, but there's a lot of great steps that are happening that are going to get all of us in a much better place. What does the future look like? I think, there's all the stuff that we're going to keep on working at, but I think for brand owners and retailers, we're going to start seeing, and we're already seeing, a lot more weight limitations. Removal of badging and external packaging. External packaging, as Rosie and Sarah went through, is not conducive for a lot of brands. And also things like badging affects the recycle stream. So we're starting to see a lot of that being taken off, or actually being requested to remove in some markets. Recycled content will keep on growing. And reusable bottles will keep on popping up, which is a fantastic thing. I made it as quick as possible. Is everybody still with me? Yeah. Good. Any questions? Carl.
It's a complicated one, really. You mentioned that we buy our bottles from 41 miles away.
Yep.
And we're a carbon neutral distillery now. So I think you can probably all hear me without. If you're bringing on board new processes where you've got more efficient plants in, say, France,
Yeah.
how would I be able to work out getting that bottle from your more efficient plant in France with a better for my carbon footprint and getting from the local one to me that's not as...
I think as a general rule, at least how we're working in the UK, is that if we can source stuff and run stuff locally, we will continue doing that. I think that there will be, as it becomes public about electric furnaces, things like this, there will be requests and there will be an understanding. But, if we look at, some of the points, there's a lot of things that will feed into it around miles, around what's more sustainable. And what you also have to remember is that a furnace life is only between 6 to 10 years. So, we rebuilt a furnace last year, we're rebuilding another furnace this year, and we're going to do 2 more next year. So, and the technology has changed on all of those. So, it will keep on turning, and you will see natural improvements throughout the UK and throughout Europe, wherever you're from. John.
Nolan, great presentation, and I would recommend you guys to any emerging brands.
Hang on.
Thanks, mate.
Testing.
With the bottles you produce for emerging brands like us, would you provide that information, the statistics around sustainability, to them? And if so, why don't you do that as a standard so that we can fly your flag for you?
Yeah, it's a fair question. So there's a lot of contributing factors, and we are working on tools to be able to do it. So depending on what machine you run on and what furnace you run on and what factory, there's different stats. I think a lot of the stats that we brought up today, though, are readily available stats. So you have European averages on carbon from glass furnaces, for instance, and that's why I said it's an estimate. That's what we did it on. It's not us. It's an overall estimate, which also feeds in energy use and things like that in different markets. And then things like shipping miles. There's 100 tools online. So once again, that's an estimate because the actual shipping by boat is really tough to calculate. So we just did it by road miles. So there's estimations. And I think this is the whole thing, is that the best that all of us can do right now is, unless you're like a huge company with a huge department, and I know some of you guys are here, but for most people, working on the averages and looking at your estimates is, from my view, is absolutely fine. And how we've seen it with our customers, with a lot of the supermarket buyers, is that's fantastic. As long as you show that you're making big steps and you're making the right decisions, that's what they're looking for. Martini time. Good, excellent. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate your time.